Cameroon's government will shut the border with Nigeria tonight and beef up security ahead of a symbolic declaration of independence by activists in the country's English-speaking areas. The authorities in the southwest have appealed for calm and introduced a number of control measures, including banning travel between towns and shutting nightclubs, suspending public transport and the use of commercial motorbikes, and forbidding meetings of more than 4 people. This will all be in place from tonight until Monday morning. So what's behind the tension and protests that have been going on for months? English speakers in Cameroon have long complained about discrimination in the country. The root of the problem comes from the division of what is now Cameroon between the British and French colonial powers after World War I. Although the two areas came together after independence, many in the northwest and southwest still consider themselves as Anglophones and feel they have been treated unfairly by the French-speaking majority. Well, campaigners say that they want the 1st of October to be symbolically named as their Independence Day. But what exactly does that mean? The BBC's Alex Duval-Smith joins us now from Dakar. Alex, what statement are they trying to make?
Well, about 20% of Cameroon's population is believed to be English-speaking, and the 1st of October is a symbolic date for them. It's the anniversary of the independence from Britain in 1961 of the Protectorate of Southern Cameroon, and that created a federation, which a lot of people in English-speaking Cameroon are happy with. In 1972, however, that federation was abolished in favour of a unified and centralised Cameroon, where the more recent problems appear to have begun.
And what's been the reaction of the government to this symbolic declaration of independence? I mean, apart from these measures that they've put in place to ensure security.
Oh, I mean, you listed them, and the travel ban, the closing the borders with Nigeria from 8 p.m. GMT tonight until 7 a.m. on Monday morning, which is a very direct pointer towards Nigeria. And I have to say that the Nigerian government hasn't reacted, treating this as an internal issue for Cameroon, and the travel ban between cities. So people basically in Western Cameroon are living in fear of a violent clampdown of the demonstration on Sunday. We understand that a lot of people have actually taken the last transport available and got out and moved over to French-speaking Cameroon to spend at least the weekend there.
And of course, this just doesn't end with this declaration because, I mean, the Anglophone area of Cameroon has been complaining about marginalization for years.
Oh, yeah, and it's very clear when you drive into English-speaking Cameroon from French-speaking Cameroon, you know, suddenly the roads become worse, and people are very aware of their difference in identity, which leads to a lot of hard feeling. And I think one of the reasons why this month, September, has been we've been seeing several flashpoints is that the schools went back, and in the schools, in the classrooms, people are speaking French, whereas the English speakers want to speak English. Same with the judiciary; they want judges who speak English, not French. So all these things are coming to the surface again in the run-up of this anniversary that people want to mark.
It is something that we've been covering for months, Doreen, here on the News Grid for quite some time. And we actually receive hundreds of WhatsApp messages about Cameroon pretty much every single day. Now, many people have sent videos like this one of people celebrating what they call Ambazonian culture and pride. But we've also seen lots of pictures like these of protests and violence. Some of these videos are so graphic that we couldn't even show them today. People bloody and injured after fighting with police. There have also been widespread protests like this one in southern Cameroon for almost a year now, despite them being banned. And activists say the internet is regularly shut down there, including at this very moment. So Cameroon's government denies this, and we've received several messages from people who worry the conflict could escalate. Akari Muna, the chairman of the International Anti-Corruption Conference Council, has written a letter to the UN Secretary General saying that he is seeing all the elements of genocide that were present in Sierra Leone and Rwanda, and that the lack of government response has permitted the secessionist movement to achieve popular support. Muna has asked the United Nations to immediately intervene to avoid what he calls massive, unnecessary bloodshed. Now, that intervention never came. It's unclear if violence escalated on Sunday as Mona predicted, but we have received several video messages from people who say secession is the only solution left. Many of them did not want to reveal their identities out of fear for their personal safety.
By all the standards of the UN, we are a people. We have a territory of our own. We recognize international boundaries. We have a language. We have a culture. We have our own laws. We have everything that is required by international standards to be a people and a nation and a state. The UN must give us this right.
We as a people, we have the right to self-determination, and we are determined to go our separate ways.
The people of the Southern Cameroons have suffered under the brutal regime of the annexationists, La République du Cameroun. We have suffered for 56 years, and we finally decided that enough is enough.
I think dialogue is the main solution, because the use of military has never been a solution to a problem concerning this kind of issues. So the government of Cameroon has to dialogue with the Anglophone regions to come to a compromise and let this problem be solved.
Now, meanwhile, many others, like the tens of thousands of people who've liked this particular Facebook page, say reforms would be enough to keep the country unified and its people happy. So, what do you think of the continuing tension in southern Cameroon? You can connect with us using the hashtag AJNewsGrid.
All right, it's time now for Focus, and today we have a report on the tensions in Cameroon's English-speaking regions. Anglophones say they're being treated as second-class citizens. Lawyers were the first to take action, protesting against the use of French in courts. Then, teachers went on strike. Last month, several people were killed during a protest in Bamenda, the country's largest Anglophone city. And that's where our report begins.
From the hills above the valley, the breathtaking view of a defiant city. Bamenda, the capital of one of the two Anglophone regions of Cameroon, is now under the supervision of special police protection units. Armed patrols in a city at the epicenter of an unprecedented contestation, still bruised after several days of rioting. In this amateur video shot by protesters, flames of anger rise above the city. At the head of the procession, one of the leaders of the protest, Mancho Bibixi, the mouthpiece of these Anglophone protesters, a linguistic minority in an officially bilingual country. A few days later, freed after being arrested, he's still determined to fight in the name of the 20% of Anglophones that feel marginalised by Francophones. Living in a centralised state is out of the question for this activist.
Either they give us a federation, which means that the Anglophone population will have their own parliament. They will have a prime minister. And the same thing will be for the Francophone population. And they will live together. We can elect our mayor, we elect our governor, and we stay together. If they don't want to give us that, then they should allow us go. Let Anglophones go their way and form their own state. Let Francophones stay in La République.
The English school system on a month-long strike is at a standstill, demanding a federal state with an autonomous English language administration. Wilfred Tassang, leader of a powerful teachers' union, is in a standoff with the government after he decreed the closure of schools.
Where's my brother?
A directive that was widely followed, like at this school. For him, there's no backing down without obtaining linguistic preference for English teachers.
Our grievances have to do with the fact that the government is training and sending Francophone teachers to teach Anglophone children. And to us, the word we use is that they unteach the children, they destroy the children, because they teach them in a language that is neither English nor French.
On the surface, things seem to have returned to normal in Bamenda, but so far, no agreement's been reached between the Cameroonian government and the Anglophone protesters. Relative calm has returned in the streets despite a burdening tension in the air in this historic opposition stronghold. A few kilometres from the city, an immense estate belonging to the man regarded as the richest of Cameroon, a billionaire Anglophone, reputedly close to the government. A quiet entrepreneur involved for several days in discreet negotiations to avoid further escalation of the Anglophone crisis. The red line: absolutely no federalism in a country with nearly 300 local languages and almost as many ethnic groups.
Federalism is not possible at all. It's not possible. I cannot even write it down. It's not possible at all. We are beyond that now, long time. It's not possible. When anybody who is asking for federalism, really he doesn't like this Cameroon.
Federalism, a political system applied in the country after the French and English tutelage between 1961 and 1972, dates back to the reunification of the two Cameroons. A united republic, never accepted by this small group advocating the secession of the Anglophone region. An illegal organisation, according to Cameroonian law, sporting a forbidden secessionist flag.
Freedom now! Freedom now!
A handful of elderly militants, already imprisoned several times, still dream of an independent English-speaking country.
We are all resolved. Southern Cameroonians who are the owners of this land understand it. And that is why the clamor now is for nothing but independence.
The Anglophone issue will most likely be a fixture on the Cameroonian political agenda throughout 2017.
Now, for more on the situation in Cameroon, I'm joined in the studio by Julie Owono. She works for Internet Without Borders and is the head of their Africa Bureau. Hello, thank you very much indeed for coming in. I'd like to start off with a bit more context. There aren't just two official languages in Cameroon. There are two completely different systems, right?
Absolutely. The Anglophone problem could be summarized not only by the language issue, but also by a conflict of laws, a conflict of systems. On the one hand, you have two different colonial realities, which are the French colonial era in the Francophone part and the English-speaking one, which resulted in two different systems: the common law system on the one hand, the civil law system on the other hand, the self-government system on the one hand, and the assimilation and centralized system on the other hand. And the question really in Cameroon for the past 60 years has been how to reconcile these two visions and how to make them work into a united government, into a united country. And unfortunately, history has proved that until now, Cameroonian authorities have not been able to find a solution to that. The first solution was federalism, which was federalism only in the name, because in the Constitution, even the predominance of French was recognized in the Constitution, 1961 Constitution. And then there was unification in 1972, which resulted indeed in probably marginalizing further the Anglophone part of the country and the Anglophone population, which results today in the fact that citizens, constituents don't understand why in Anglophone countries they are governed by, préfets who do not speak English, or who go to the post office and are met with people who don't speak English and who don't want to speak English. And this is, I think, where the marginalization feeling was born in Cameroon.
Why do you think, though, it's now that we're seeing people take to the streets, we're seeing the Anglophone minority say enough is enough?
Historically, we've seen that in Cameroon, these federalism with this secessionist sometimes expression have coincide with social and economic ordeals for the country. We remember in 1990 when the Social Democratic Front, which is the first opposition party in Cameroon, was born in Bamenda, in the northwest region, and it was born because at that time the country was facing serious economic crisis, which was followed later on by a devaluation of the CFA franc. Today, the situation is less worse, but it's not that good either. We know that there is commodity prices crush in the commodity crisis in the world, which has affected countries of the Central African region. And recently, those countries adopted several austerity measures that will impact citizens and impact the finances of the country. And obviously, this will have a direct impact on this type of, expression, federalism and marginalization expression by the Anglophone region. But I think separation is probably not the solution in my opinion.
Why is that?
Because well, it's been 16 years that both Cameroon have been trying to live together, and most importantly, citizens have accepted that reality. There is a language called in Cameroon Cam Franglais, which mixes French, Cameroonian languages, and English. So it means that for Cameroonians, it's a fact that we are united. Now,
do the majority French speakers, how do they feel about what's happening in the English-speaking regions? Do they have some empathy? Do they understand the concerns?
They would probably understand if they were explained more or better what's
Are they even
stake.
informed about what's happening? That's the thing.
Oh, that's a very good question. When there were a demonstration in the Anglophone part of the country, it coincided with the African women football competition, the AFCON. Well, the priority was given to that competition compared to what was happening in the Western region. But nevertheless, thanks to social media, people were informed of the fact that students had been beaten up, people had been judged, there were people who had been killed. But they were informed of the harsh response and repression that occurred in the Western region. And they empathize. They felt empathy for that. So I think there is a room for dialogue compared to the policy of burying head in the sand that the Cameroonian government has been having for the past 60 years. Cameroonian citizens are ready for the dialogue, and I think that an inclusive dialogue with anyone expressing what could be the solution is what we could expect in Cameroon.
You mentioned that it has come to people dying on the streets in Cameroon. What else can you tell us about how the authorities have responded to this unrest?
For the authority, there is no problem. The Minister of Communication, Chiroma Bakari, said it several times that there is no Anglophone problem. But if there is no problem, why are people dying? Why are people demonstrating? I think it's this is a wake-up call for Cameroon to assess really what has been the administration and the policy that we have been, the country has been governed since the independence. It's a time for an assessment of that policy, and it's a time also for the government probably to suggest other ways of managing those two parts of the country.
Because a lot of people would say this is actually an opportunity, that bilingualism officially could make the country even stronger.
Absolutely. In the 21st century, having a country where populations speak both French and English is an absolute asset. And moreover, the Western Southern Cameroon, as it is called, is also one of the most vital, economically vital places of the country. Limbe, where the oil industry is so lively. Limbe's situation in the Anglophone part. So what do you do with that? Do we want to separate from that economic opportunities, or do we want to harness this asset and have a population being bilingual, have a country which has fully entered the 21st century? I think this is probably where the country should go, and where population want the authorities to take them today.
Okay, Julia Wono from Internet Without Borders, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
It is something that we've been covering for months, Doreen, here on the News Grid for quite some time. And we actually receive hundreds of WhatsApp messages about Cameroon pretty much every single day. Now, many people have sent videos like this one of people celebrating what they call Ambazonian culture and pride. But we've also seen lots of pictures like these of protests and violence. Some of these videos are so graphic that we couldn't even show them today. People bloody and injured after fighting with police. There have also been widespread protests like this one in southern Cameroon for almost a year now, despite them being banned. And activists say the internet is regularly shut down there, including at this very moment. So Cameroon's government denies this, and we've received several messages from people who worry the conflict could escalate. Karimuna, the chairman of the International Anti-Corruption Conference Council, has written a letter to the UN Secretary General saying that he is seeing all the elements of genocide that were present in Sierra Leone and Rwanda, and that the lack of government response has permitted the secessionist movement to achieve popular support. Munez asked the United Nations to immediately intervene to avoid what he calls massive, unnecessary bloodshed. Now, that intervention never came. It's unclear if violence escalated on Sunday, as Muna predicted, but we have received several video messages from people who say secession is the only solution left. Many of them did not want to reveal their identities out of fear for their personal safety.
By all the standards of the UN, we are a people. We have a territory of our own. We recognize international boundaries. We have a language. We have a culture. We have our own laws. We have everything that is required by international standards to be a people and a nation and a state. The UN must give us this right.
We as a people, we have the right to self-determination, and we are determined to go our separate ways.
The people of the Southern Cameroons have suffered under the brutal regime of the annexationists, La République du Cameroun. We have suffered for 56 years, and we finally decided that enough is enough.
I think dialogue is the main solution, because the use of military has never been a solution to a problem concerning this kind of issues. So the government of Cameroon has to dialogue with the Anglophone regions to come to a compromise and let this problem be solved.
Now, meanwhile, many others, like the tens of thousands of people who've liked this particular Facebook page, say reforms would be enough to keep the country unified and its people happy. So, what do you think of the continuing tension in southern Cameroon? You can connect with us using the hashtag AJNewsGrid.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Cameroon brings in a curfew and another internet blackout after a dozen people are reportedly killed during a secessionist protest in the Anglophone region of the country. Also in Kenya, opposition protesters call for sackings at the Electoral Commission ahead of the rerun of the presidential election later this month. They accuse police of being heavy-handed in their response to opposition rallies. And an Oromo religious festival turns into a rare event of open defiance in Ethiopia. 1 year after a stampede started by police killed dozens at the Aricha event, hundreds climb on stage to condemn the government, but this time officers stay away. First, rights groups Amnesty International claims that at least 17 people were killed in clashes in Cameroon's Anglophone region. Soldiers shot dead at least 8 people on Sunday as thousands of English-speaking separatists protested on October the 1st, the anniversary of their independence from Britain. A 48-hour curfew and internet blackout since been brought in. Many Anglophone Cameroonians say that they're frustrated with feeling like second-class citizens amongst the French-speaking majority. Our correspondents report.
Rose Findy is still shaken by this weekend's unrest. She lives in the city of Mutengeni and witnessed the violent clashes that erupted during recent Anglophone protests. On the 1st of October, she says her home was targeted by police.
I was on my bed and I heard loud noises as they forced open and broke several doors. I was sleeping and I suddenly saw them enter the room. They asked to get out. I told them I could not go out because I'm sick. Then one of them grabbed me by the arm and threw me on the ground. That's when my daughter started to cry and shout, "You want to kill my mother?"
Her daughter Sally also witnessed the raid. The family says it doesn't know why their home was targeted.
I screamed. I told them I didn't have a mother or a father. The policemen want to kill us. They were sent to keep us safe, but they beat us up. They dragged my poor mother outside.
On October 1st, English-speaking separatists symbolically declared their independence. Cameroonian authorities mobilized several hundred security forces, dispersed crowds and forced residents to stay indoors.
They destroyed the windows and threw tear gas into these houses.
The measures did not prevent demonstrations or destruction. Even residents who stayed away from separatist rallies are worried about their safety.
The governor ordered us to stay home. We stayed indoors, but they came and started firing tear gas grenades into the houses anyway. What do they want? Do they want us to live in the forest? If we don't respect their orders, they will come to stop us. If we do respect them, they will do the same thing. We have no idea what they want.
The uncertainty and instability have affected much of the English-speaking areas to Cameroon's west. On Monday evening, the city of Buea looked like a ghost town in the wake of recent tensions in which over a dozen people have been killed over the weekend.
One person died in Kenya on Monday in connection to protests against the Electoral Commission. He reportedly died as he was running away from tear gas canisters being thrown by police at crowds in the western county of Siaya. Tensions are mounting as the country gears up for the October 26th rerun of presidential elections. Supporters of opposition candidate Raila Odinga want the CEO of the Electoral Commission, Ezra Chiloba, sacked, as they blame him and other top members of the board for the annulment of the original August vote. Some demonstrators accuse police of having been too heavy-handed in tackling opposition rallies.
When we are just doing our peaceful demonstration, we are doing why? Must go.
We want Uhuru Kenyatta to respect the wish and the will of Kenyans.
Exactly. Yeah.
Justice Maraga gave a verdict
Exactly.
that we go for a fresh elections. And he said that IEBC had a systematic illegality and irregularity within the system.
Yes.
We want fresh elections with the proper instruments of IEBC. If they fail to bring us a new IEBC, then we are saying we are not going for an election.
Yes. Today we are being clobbered by tear gas and we don't know what we've done. There is no mistake we've committed. You can see police running battles with us.
Well, President Uhuru Kenyatta, whose initial victory was annulled when the Supreme Court ordered a rerun, doesn't want the IEBC's makeup to change before the vote. Julia Steers tells us more.
They're certainly getting more heated, and certainly what we're seeing from supporters on both sides, from the rhetoric of Odinga and Kenyatta themselves, from the willingness of Odinga supporters to continue to go to the street, and from the increased use of force by police here in Nairobi and in the cities that you just saw today, is certainly reaffirming some fears that Kenyans have that the country could slide back into political violence that characterized elections here over 10 years ago. There's a real sense from the candidates that the stakes are much higher this time around. Odinga has been emboldened by the court decision. He continues to urge his supporters to take to the streets for as long as it takes for them to get a credible election. Kenyatta continues to attack the institutions of the state, mainly the Supreme Court. And there's a real sense from Kenyans at large that they just want to move past this election period. The economy here has been stalled for the better part of 4 months. But at the same time, while everybody just wants to move past these elections peacefully, there is also a seemingly increasing acceptance that there's a very high likelihood that this unrest could continue and could indeed mount into what many people feared and to what the country managed to largely avoid in August, and that is politically motivated violence and continued unrest.
Now, we saw a number of foreign diplomats meet with the Electoral Board in Kenya on Monday. Is there much international concern about the political tensions in the country?
There's huge international concern, and so far that's sort of been back-channeled. It's been expressed quietly to the candidates themselves. But today what we saw was a public expression of that concern. We heard from U.S. Ambassador Robert Godek speaking on behalf of the U.S., the UK, and other diplomatic missions based here in Nairobi after their mission with the Electoral Board. And he really criticized both candidates. He went after Odinga for attacking the Electoral Board. He said that the Electoral Board that is in place is the only body in the country that can ensure a credible election this month, and so that both candidates have to just get behind that organization. And he also went after Kenyatta and Kenyatta's Jubilee Party for trying to force these measures through Parliament that would change the electoral laws here in Kenya just weeks before the election. He said that these things take time and should not be rushed through in the weeks before an election. So today certainly represented an increase increase in the diplomats based here going after both candidates. So far, like I said, they've really been back channeling. The US and the UK have been heavily involved in funding and, of course, in speaking with both parties to try and urge peace and calm. But today they took those concerns publicly, and it really represents an increased fear that things could get out of hand here.
Julie stares there for us. Now, thousands of Ethiopian Oromo pilgrims marked the Irrecha festival on Sunday in Bishoftu. The event turned into a rare protest in commemoration of the dozens of pilgrims who died during the event last year. Many Oromos accuse authorities of seizing land and trying to marginalise them. 1 year on, the Oromo community demonstrated again, and this time police stayed away.
Traditionally, the Irrecha festival is meant to celebrate the beginning of harvest season. But since last year, the ceremonies have taken a tragic turn. Dozens of pilgrims were killed right here in a stampede after police fired tear gas at people protesting.
Last year, a lot of blood was spilled during this festival. That's why now we're not staging any propaganda show, but trying to commemorate our brothers who lost their lives. And we're trying to comfort mothers who are still weeping for their loved ones.
The Oromos, the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia, have been criticizing government policies for years. They say their community, language, and traditions have been sidelined. When authorities started seizing their lands outside the capital to develop Addis Ababa, they launched their protests. To defuse the crisis, authorities have arrested thousands over the past year.
Many Oromo political leaders are in jail, and so many of our scholars and university graduates are incarcerated in prison. So that's what the people are chanting right now.
This sign is the Oromos' way of showing resistance against the ruling party, which holds almost all parliament seats. In recent months, other ethnic groups have joined their protest.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.